Thank you everyone for joining. Today we've got a recap webinar to cover the key takeaways from the 2023 recent SAFE Summit, brought to you by the teams at Scaled Agile, Atlassian, and Isos Technology. Today we're going to focus on the overarching challenge of misalignment, and we'll delve into the ways of calming the chaos that can be so prevalent in enterprises embarking upon both digital and cultural transformations. We're excited to have you here with us today. The SAFE Summit brings such a depth of thought leadership and idea sharing. So let's go ahead and get started and delve into a few topics in the short time that we have together now. I do want to mention that Isos Technology is a proud Atlassian Platinum Solution Partner, as well as a Scaled Agile Bronze Partner. Got just a little bit of housekeeping here before we get started. We are recording this. You will receive a copy of the recording shortly following the webinar once our great marketing team has a chance to pull everything together for you. The slides will be made available to you as well. We will be answering questions at the end of the presentation. Make sure you take a look at the question and answer button that you should see at the bottom of your screen, and type your questions in there, and we'll get to those at the very end. So to kick things off with introductions, I am Susan Jackin. I am with Isos Technology. I've enjoyed over 20 years in the software development, project and product management space. I currently support organizations as they scale Agile and find better ways of working, and in seeing the results of that work in meaningful, significant ways. My most recent focus and passion is around organizational change management, because it's such a crucial component to realizing that sustained change across an enterprise. So Danielle, I'll pass it to you now.
Awesome. Thanks, Susan. So I'm Danielle Paula. I'm the principal Agilist here at Isos, and I'm an SPC 6.0. And I've been in the Agile space now for a little over a decade. I admit I did drink the Agile Kool-Aid a little while back. I love what agility can bring to both businesses and to employees. This was my first SAFE conference, and I really do appreciate the opportunity to be here with the Scaled Agile Institute and Atlassian to share what we heard. And I'll pass it over to Jim.
Fantastic. Thank you, Danielle. My name is Jim Fowler. I'm a strategic advisor and SPCT here at Scaled Agile. Date myself a little bit. I've had the pleasure or displeasure, some may say, of working in the software development world before all these buzzwords of Agile started. And then as I transitioned over into the more modern day, my actual experience before Agile was a thing was in working in a team where we naturally kind of worked that way. And then when I joined larger organizations, realized that, I initially thought everybody worked that way, and realized very quickly they didn't, and the frustrations that came from that. So I had the opportunity to learn how we can actually work with these large organizations, these large enterprises, and show how it can be done and how Agile can actually be useful, meaningful, and apply even in large organizations, and have been working with them ever since. I'll turn it over now to Rhonda.
Yeah, I think we have a very similar background. I've been in the IT industry for quite a long time. In fact, I first started out as a network engineer, a Novell engineer, if anybody's old enough to know what that is. But currently, I'm a senior solutions engineer for enterprise level type of the way of working at Atlassian. I've been here close to 2 years, but I've been in the Agile space and enterprise Agile coaching executives for more than 10 to 15 years. And I really enjoy what it brings to organizations, and really enjoy coaching and teaching that too. So I appreciate being here. Thank you.
Thank you all. So as we move into a quick overview of the recent SAFE Summit, for those of you who were there or maybe didn't have a chance to attend, and you can make plans to attend next year. So the most recent event hosted 1,510 attendees at the beautiful Nashville Gaylord. Almost 20% of those attendees were from the government space, so their focus was in government work, and we're seeing a steady rise in that regard. The event most recently was held in August. It was the 15th through the 18th. The summit experience kicked off with a targeted partner day on day one. There were two main summit days, and then a wrap-up day 4 of targeted workshops to wrap up a busy, very rich week. Next year's summit will be in Washington, D.C. The dates for that are October 14th through the 17th. That's October 14th through the 17th. And then I'd love to hear from Jim on more details in regards to the summit specifically.
Fantastic. Thank you, Susan. Yeah, I had the pleasure of being one of the track chairs to help select some of the speakers for the summit. And I would like to think that we did a great job of really selecting some good speakers in several various tracks. Our tracks that we had were one on enhancing business agility, really focusing on what that means to achieve business agility in an organization. Had another track on building large solutions. So how do we go and build some of these largest solutions? You think of companies like BuyIn and others that build these huge solutions that take many hundreds, if not thousands of people and teams working together. So we had a track focused just on that space. Then we had one on accelerating value delivery. So how do we really accelerate that value delivery in organizations? Another track on leadership and strategy, and how does leadership engage in the transformations? How do we go about strategy alignment as well as strategy agility, and really being able to apply there? So the talks focus there. Another track on sustaining your transformation. Now that we've actually launched a transformation, these talks really focused on how do we keep it going? How do we make sure that we don't stall and start to fade back into our old ways of working? So a lot of really good talks in that area. Susan had mentioned the workshops that we had on the Friday after the summit. We had almost 300 people stay behind and attend those workshops, some really great workshops. These are ones that we're testing out for being able to release here soon to the public. We had a workshop on applying SAFe across the enterprise. How do you expand out of just engineering and IT implementations into the broader enterprise? We had ones on those building big systems with value stream management. So again, that focus on those really large systems and working with the large solutions there. Then we had a workshop on measuring what matters for business agility. What are those metrics that you want to track for the alignment towards business agility? How do we know that we're actually achieving true business agility? And then we had a workshop on coaching flow and Kanban methods. So as a coach in the organization, it's one thing to just understand flow, but how do you actually coach that to your organization, coach that to your teams? And this workshop was really focused on those coaches and helping them really upskill themselves in the areas of flow and Kanban. And then finally, a workshop on unsticking a transformation. What do you do if we launched our transformation, things were going great, but now all of a sudden things have slowed down. We really don't feel like we're progressing anymore, and things have plateaued. So we have a workshop that was just on getting that unstuck, getting that momentum moving and flowing again. So really great participation in that workshop. Had some wonderful customer stories. Customers such as ServiceNow, CVS Health, Petrobras, one of the largest oil and gas companies in the world, came and told their story of their transformation and how they're using SAFe in a non-technology industry, right? We're looking at oil and gas. Bell Canada, Boeing, all had center stage presentations on their stories and their journeys of how they've been applying the framework, and in some ways, some of their frustrations that they had to work through, and know that we're not alone in the fact that it is difficult to actually change a large enterprise into a new way of working, a new way of thinking. So it's really great to hear those other customer stories that we can kind of relate to and understand how that applies to our various organizations. Some really great buzzwords and themes that were flying around, as we walked through the hallways and listened to people talk. They were talking about the fact that, we were calling out that the framework is flexible. Roles, they're roles, not titles, and how they can actually apply the roles in their organization and how it works there. The importance of change management, really a focus on that, and that really resonated well with people, and a lot of talk on that, focusing on value and what that that means to them and what it means for an organization to really focus within there. So a lot of really great themes and buzzwords that we were hearing.
Thank you so much, Jim. So much there to unpack. So what I'd like to do now is let's move over to our panel to talk about what's most important to our attendees. So let's kick off the first of our 2 polls that we'll have during this session today, so that you, the attendees in the audience, can share your experiences with us. So poll number 1, you should see that on your screen. What area do you find most challenging in your Agile transformation? And in this poll, you're going to select one only. A SAFe framework that's too prescriptive. Do you find that generating leadership buy-in and alignment is a struggle? What about generating metrics that don't uncover actionable insights? And then last choice is placing greater value on activities more so than the value that's being delivered. So we'll give you just a moment to weigh in here. Again, you're going to select one: SAFe framework being too prescriptive, generating leadership buy-in and alignment, generating metrics that don't uncover actionable insights, and finally, placing greater value on activities more so than the value delivered. We have our results. So it looks like by a significant lead, unfortunately, generating leadership buy-in and alignment seems to be the most consistent struggle across the field here. Thank you for weighing in on that. It's super helpful as we delve into all of these in more detail. What we'll do now is go straight over to Danielle. Would you like to weigh in on one of the most crucial takeaways from the summit regarding the framework of SAFe?
Thank you, Susan. I think it's kind of funny. So seeing, SAFe as a framework and not a prescription, this was something that we heard a lot. And I'm really happy to see that, only 4% of our attendees today have actually said that, hey, that's like a really big problem that we're having within our organization, because that's exactly what we're going to talk about today, is how it's not a prescription. I mean, I think, we think about the SAFe framework and, what is a framework to begin with? It's the building blocks that we all follow. So if you have a house, you have a mix of walls, windows, doors, you've got a roof that covers it. But the way in which you bring those together and the styles and the different contexts can build you anything from a tiny house to some sort of luxury villa or a modern marvel. And it's the same with the SAFe framework, right? It's if you're focusing on the alignment, transparency, respect for people, relentless improvement, you're going to be off to a great start. And we saw so much of that at Summit. My favorite talk was specifically from FedEx. FedEx gave a keynote, and they had a really interesting story here. Like most organizations, they started their SAFe transformation in IT, but then they quickly grew to marketing and then got the attention of their leadership levels. So for the 71%, I think, of you that were looking for that leadership buy-in, I know we're going to cover that a little bit later, but FedEx touched on that as well too. And what FedEx was seeing is that the framework was specifically a framework, and it allowed them to make it their own. A specific example was within their roles. I think Jim kind of talked about this. They needed to take a modern approach to the names, roles, and responsibilities, and those expected outcomes that they would have for their organization, not just taking a product manager and turning them into a scrum master, but really understanding what those roles and responsibilities were going to look like for their organization and adapting to that. The other thing that I think the FedEx team talked about, which was really important, is that they were focusing on the evolution of the SAFe framework. SAFe framework is always evolving with a modern organization. So we just saw 6.0 come out. There will be continuous improvements that are being made within the SAFe framework. And that's really important to modern organizations to know that a framework is going to grow and support them throughout their life cycle as well. And I think, SAFe is meant to be flexible. A lot of us see that Candyland roadmap and think that's exactly how it's going to be implemented. And I think any of us on this call probably know that that's not exactly true. It's important to understand that there's a lot that goes into a SAFe transformation, and you're going to have to find what's best for your organization within your business context. And I think if you're working with SAFe fellows, SAFe experts, coaches, people who really get the Agile mindset and those values that we talked about earlier, you're going to be very successful with your scaled Agile implementation and find that it can be flexible for your business context.
Thank you so much. Good stuff, Danielle. Jim, I want to talk to you about the aspects of leadership buy-in and common challenges around this. What perspectives can you share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. We saw in our poll there that this is one of the top challenges that organizations face. It's an issue that's been around a little bit when it comes to Agile and how Agile works, especially in enterprises, because when we look at traditional leadership training, traditional kind of business management schooling and education, the ways that they're trained, even in today's business schools, is really focused on yesterday's methods of working, looking at the Industrial Revolution and the whole command and control kind of atmosphere of leaders just being the experts that just dictate and tell, the knowledge workers, just go and do this, and they go and make it happen. And they really haven't been brought into the fold on the understanding of the mindset shift that has to happen for these leaders to actually engage in the modern world. And in some cases, they've almost feel like they've been set aside by the Agile community. And in the way that we've treated some of the leadership in the past of like, well, we don't need a lot of management, and this focus on leveling the organizations and getting rid of a lot of leadership. And so in many cases they feel threatened by it. So it is really hard to sometimes get them to engage and understand that we don't want to threaten leadership. We have to figure out, how do we talk to our leadership in a way that resonates with them, that honors where they came from as leaders of the organization. Many of them have been in our organizations 20, 30 years leading it. And now who are we to come in and tell them, hey, your style doesn't work and you need to do something different? We need to honor where they've been and then transition that talk into, but the world has changed, and here's how you can actually engage and transition into a new way of doing things that's going to really take your leadership to the next level and really excel the organization. Scott Frost did a wonderful talk on why business-led, executive-led transformations are amongst our most successful transformations. Because when we actually partner with business and we overcome those boundaries of the thinking of, well, we've got IT and engineering over here, and we've got business over here, and business does their thing and then throws it over to IT, and we just hope that it all comes together. And they've learned that when we overcome that and we say, no, this is a partnership. There is no engineering, there is no IT and business. It's we all work together, and that requires alignment amongst those leaders. It requires that we're able to get them talking, and we're able to unify them towards a single goal of which they want to deliver against. So we need to move away from technology having their independent goals of, oh, well, we want to do DevOps. We want to focus on, team accelerating team delivery, just making them churn stuff out faster. And you start getting those IT leadership to recognize, well, we're here for a purpose, and that's to deliver value to our customers, and to work with business to deliver that value and understand what value is to the customers. Now you start to get better engagement and buy-in from the leadership, because they understand that they need to work together, and it's extremely important. We don't want to set you aside. We want to invite you in and make sure that you are leading us through this transformation. We value your leadership. We absolutely need your insights, and we need you to understand what is different about this way of working that really takes that focus from the leadership. When you think of change management, that was one of those buzzwords that really were floating around there, and some of the focus on that. Part of change management is understanding, how leaders connect into that, making sure that they understand where their connection point is. What is their role in a transformation? Why is it critical? What are those success factors that if they don't participate, here's the risk involved in that? When we start talking risk versus reward, and a lot of leadership in enterprises are very well versed on risk and risk aversion for our enterprise. So when you start to lay it out in the fashion of, here's our risks that we're going to incur if you're not involved in this. This is really where we need you involved and how we need you connected. And that helps us to overcome those risks. Then we can really start to get a lot more of that leadership involvement and buy-in there. So we had some other great talks besides Scott Frost, with that focus on leadership and strategy. I encourage you to go and take a look at those and have a listen to those and really help you to understand how to communicate better to get that leadership buy-in and alignment for your organization.
I love the stressing the importance of breaking down that we, they mentality. And it's that collective vision, with bringing everybody into the fold there. Thank you, Jim. So when we think about delivering value, what can you share in this regard?
Yeah, absolutely. Value, what is value to an organization, right? When we talk about value, going kind of back to that leadership buy-in and the partnership, if we don't have a real partnership and you ask what is value to the IT organization or to engineering, they tend to focus on things like, oh, well, technology improvements, DevOps, team execution, and those sorts of things, and how just being quick on delivery for whatever the business asks for, that's value to them. But value delivery really changes when you actually do get that partnership and when you get that alignment. Now they start to realize that, well, in IT, if all we focus on is that technology and team improvement, we can improve to a great deal to where we're kind of, I like to draw pictures, mental pictures. So you can think of, IT, we focus on getting teams really good at shoveling rocks out the door, right? We're shoveling a whole bunch of rock. Look at how great we are at shoveling rock. Well, but are we in the business of selling rocks, or are we in the business of selling gold and diamonds and rubies? And therefore, shoveling a bunch of rock out the door doesn't really help us all that much. If we come together and we focus together on what the ultimate value is for the customer and what the ultimate value to the organization is, now we can create that unified goal between business and IT and say, we don't need to shovel a bunch of rock. It might actually be even more meaningful to the organization to slow down a little bit, and let's learn how we can focus on what that value for the organization is. What is our gold? What is our diamonds? What is it that actually brings value? And now the business and IT can connect together and understand how we can better focus and identify more quickly what that true value is, what the true outcome that we want to focus on, and be able to effectively deliver that. Once we figure out that value, we organize on that, and then we can structure our flow for that value. Then we can think about, okay, how do we speed that value chain up? But we really have to understand that focus on value first, and that partnership and agreement there. And then when we start looking at how do we speed things up, well, we got to go beyond the just, hey, we can make teams work faster. If we implement this technology, for DevOps and stuff, it makes, test-driven development go much faster, and integration and all that sort of techie stuff that then the business folks just kind of go, well, I don't know what you're talking about. When we can translate that into the language of business, right? What is the language of business? It's dollars and cents. What is the effect on our bottom line or our top line? And so now we can start to translate and say, okay, from an engineering and IT side, if we make these improvements, that translates to our ability to deliver this much more value in the future, which generates this much more revenue. Now you're going to really start to get the interest of those leaders to say, oh, okay, I understand what you're talking about. And we start to transition from this being an expense of, well, I just need money to implement this training over here or this tooling, that they just think of, okay, you're spending money, it's an expense. And you start to speak, no, we need to invest in this area. I need this much to invest based off of what we believe and what the industry tells us. That's going to gain us this much increase in our ability to deliver value, which translates to this much revenue or this much cost savings for us. So we can really get into that language of the business and help us focus on what actually delivers value. If we can't do that translation into the language of business, is it really valuable to the organization? It might be a cool thing to do, but it might not actually be delivering the value that we really want to focus on. So we need to understand how to find that value and how to really focus there on that value.
I love that. So it's all about focusing on the why we're building what we're building, and is it relevant to our business goals, and being able to couch that in business speak. Super important. So thank you, Jim. So we've talked about alignment across the entire organization, bringing together IT and business. We've talked about focusing on delivering value, the right value. So Rhonda, I want to ask you, how do we know what we're tracking well and what's not tracking so well?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I actually come from a BI background. So this is really close to my experience and my heart. And just like Jim has pointed out, metrics that matter, but value delivery, some type of value delivery metrics. And we're hearing this more and more. It's not anything new in the industry. The Agile frameworks, are focusing more on outcomes, just like Jim was talking about, and emphasizes more on the product and the value-oriented approach, value streams, right? And this contrast, this traditional project-oriented approach that focus more on outputs, budgets, milestones, and those kind of things, right? So what does product orientation look like across the organization? That's what we kind of have to ask ourselves. And what does this mean? Product teams are driven by customers, right? The customers' requirements flow through the products teams continuously. And a lot of times this is referred to a system, right? We talk from A to Z, the system. And I would refer to this as an ongoing backlog or a rolling roadmap that's ongoing. You're constantly getting this feedback, right? And this way of working helps ensure that products and solutions are delivered at high quality and what the customer needs. So, it's critical path, and it's the responsibility of these customer outcomes to be shared across leadership, just like we're all pointing out, and what the SAFE Summit actually addressed. So whether it's leadership, portfolio teams, program teams, teams of teams, scrum teams, all of those things, right? Ideation, strategy to delivery. It really means something to have that insight and to understand metrics that matter. SAFE actually refers to and supports some of these goals of business agility, right? Outcomes, flow, and competency. And Jim actually mentioned that in his overview above. If you've ever had the opportunity to, late Friday night, read Mike Kirsten's book, it's called Project to Products. And this presents the concepts actually around value stream metrics, right? That correlate the flow of business value, much like what we've been talking about here, through value streams to business outcomes, right? And he identifies, and you've probably heard this quite a bit at the summit, is there's two kind of sets of value flow metrics, right? There's flow metrics and there's business results. And business results is many times referred to in the industry. You'll see the acronym as BAVS, or Business Agility Value Streams. And it's become a very crucial part of that big picture of acknowledging importance at an enterprise agility level, right? So from start to finish, right? And in those, you talk about business results, you're really talking about quantitative and qualitative measures of value delivered. And you tie those, to the business or customer, doesn't matter if it's internal, external. And then another key thing is the happiness of the people or the teams that are delivering this value. Happiness, and good, happy people deliver, high quality stuff. And there's 6 types of flow metrics that we're seeing consistently through, the industry. You have flow distribution. So what does flow distribution do? It really measures the amount of each type of work item. So, you talk about strategy to execution, portfolio level, each one of those levels, they all kind of work across their statuses and states, from ideation on, right? And you need to learn to balance. So what this helps you do is visually see the balance of current and future velocity. Too much of one area can impact another. Like, for example, you're just focused on, business and customer needs, but this also might impact, some of your architectural or your infrastructure areas, which then will soon probably tie into some type of technical debt. So that balance is very important. That visibility is crucial, right, to understanding. Flow velocity. We all talk about velocity. We've heard about velocity for quite a while within the industry, but really measuring the number of units of value, again, tying to value and completed in a time period, like a PI. It could be multiple PIs, it could be the whole year, however you want to dissect that bit of information. And you might hear this as throughput. So many times in the industry, we'll hear people refer to this as throughput. And by gaining the visibility into this throughput and deliberative value, it can help raise questions of improvements, right? And require, and give you insight to flow velocity in order to meet those business or those outcomes of the organization. So it helps you identify those areas of improvement. And then flow time is just probably what you're thinking is. It's the measurement of time elapsed, actually, when you start working on a unit of value in the value stream and then released to the customer. So A to Z, we really want to understand. And what this helps you do is, let's say, and it's an extensive flow time, right? And this is an indicator of impediments or some area of improvement, because what you're trying to do is improve that flow time. And you may, hear in the industry more about lead time or time to market, right? So those are some key areas that we tend to focus on. And then flow load, you can just imagine what flow load is, right? It's the measure of number of works that's currently in progress. And this can be active or waiting. It's that full view of what we would consider work, again, across all the different levels. Everybody can see insights to the area that people work in time needs to improve in order to get that high quality and get that, what I would call a Christmas present out the door, right, on time, so people are happy. And then flow efficiency. This is actually the ratio of time, the value added with work activities divided by the flow time, right? You may need to look that up, but it's kind of a formula there. And what this is going to give you insight to, like low flow efficiency may indicate that the flow of value is stagnating, right? And waiting in steps do. So you have multiple steps, whether it's 1 or 5, right? I many times hear these as stages, steps, many different things that you can refer to, but it's kind of wading into those, and it can help you identify those inefficiencies and actually see larger queues. So it results in large queues in those statuses and states of more work in progress. And then lastly, flow predictability. And this is at every level. We generally I like to start at, generally team level, because those are where it starts. And if you have, it's consistency teams, arts, portfolio, again, across the enterprise. What does this give you insight to? Low or erratic or unpredictable teams, really, this makes it impossible, sometimes unrealistic, to hit the bottom line things that you're trying to deliver. And it really can give you insight and highlights of problems in technology, planning, and just within the organization or team performance itself, and then help you address those and move that work at high quality along. At Atlassian, I talk to hundreds and hundreds of customers every year, right? And I see that many of them, and we're having a lot of discussions transitioning from project to product. And on the Jira platform, measuring the flow of the value from A to Z, and then putting those to business outcomes. And this is just making it more meaningful for them. That's actually giving them true insight in real time, and to identify these areas of improvement so they can deliver at higher quality and speed to market, right? It's really about the data insight that leads to better decision making. So very important flow metrics. If you haven't really looked into those or have a little research to do, we have some great content either via Atlassian or the Scaled Agile sites that can give you more detail on those and what the benefits of those are.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. So before I forget, everyone here, we have dropped links to these great resources that Rhonda shared, so you can capture those and delve into those into more detail later. Thank you so much. A key takeaway for me listening to you talk about all the metrics around flow, and just what we're uncovering is that wait state. It's not just active work. It's uncovering what's waiting and why is it waiting, and going from there. So thank you for this.
Yeah, what's the point of having this big queue and it just
Yeah,
sitting there if you can't get it through the
yeah.
system?
It's like, "Oh, we didn't even know it's waiting." Yeah.
Yeah,
Which yeah, yeah. So thank you so much for this. So now we're going to move to poll number 2. And this is going to get more into how do we detect misalignment. So let's move over to that. This poll is multiple choice. So uh, please select all that apply here. And the poll is this. What are some symptoms of misalignment that you're experiencing within your organization? Confusion over company and departmental goals, confusion over what to measure, little to no communication or just absolute miscommunication, little to no visibility into what other departments are working on, and finally, wasted work. So again, you can pick as many as are relevant for you. So it's multiple choice here. And we'll have the results displaying really shortly. A lot of confusion to choose from here. Company and departmental goals, confusion over what to measure, little or no communication or miscommunications occurring. And we have our results. Interesting. We've got a fairly consistent distribution here. This looks like wasted work and confusion over company and departmental goals are the top votes, but we've got a pretty steady distribution here around confusion over what to measure, communication issues, and then that lack of visibility as part of the crucial things to deal with here. So lots of commonality across the attendees here in terms of symptoms of misalignment. So let's talk about how we can get more aligned in an environment like this. So here's where the chaos comes in. Panel, let's take it over to you and weigh in on identifying and addressing some of these symptoms.
So I'll jump in. So the one specifically about kind of the misalignment, and if you saw us at Safe Summit or you were following us on social media during Safe Summit, you would have noticed that we were really focused on this concept of a journey to alignment. And what that really is about is making sure that we're all on the same page about what we're actually trying to accomplish as an organization and what is going to help us get to those business results that we're looking after. There is a quote, and I forget who said it, but it was something like, is this best for the business? Is always thinking about that. Is it best for the business? And trying not to think about, well, this is my pet project. It's something that is a priority to me, may not necessarily be a priority to the rest of the organization. So making sure that we're all in alignment, and sometimes that can be a tougher conversation or taking people on the side and just having a discussion about, well, what is really best for the business, setting ego aside, right? And just making sure that we're all in alignment of what's going to help us achieve the business outcomes that we're looking for can really be important and impactful for you and your org.
Yeah, I'll step in here too. One of the things I want to say, since I said metrics are, an important part of an organization and identifying, is the sensitivity around metrics, right? I've worked with many organizations where there needs to be a little sensitivity there. There's a lot of transparency in metrics. And when you discuss these across the organization, people understanding that you're trying to be more data driven, and the sensitivity, to that approach and that type of visibility and transparency. It's not finger pointing. It's really, are we all in this together? And trying to, again, deliver at higher quality or higher value to our customers. And I've worked in organizations many a times, and this is no kidding, is we had these statistics, and I had somebody from high up reach out to me and tell me they didn't really like the report. And I said, why? Is the data incorrect? Is there a problem with it? Let's have a meeting about it. And they're like, no, it's not really a happy report. It doesn't show, actually good things. And I said, but it's realistic and it's true. So let's identify this. So again, leadership is very much involved, but there is sensitivity around transparency, and then who uses those metrics and how they're transferred, and actually how you manipulate that information or communicate that information to the rest of the organization. I think we need to be very aware of that.
Yeah, I really like how you call that out, Rhonda, and I think it brings up actually a topic that we haven't quite discussed yet, which is the psychological safety in the organization. And when we're talking about the metrics like that tendency for what we call the semiconductor organization, which you kind of described there of, well, we don't want to hear the bad news. We don't want to hear, only the good news ever gets escalated up to leadership. And then we wonder why at the end of the day, they're surprised that we missed a deadline, or they're surprised that we didn't deliver the value that we were actually attempting to deliver, because all they got was the good information going up, and we didn't have the safety to actually bring about the metrics to state, well, no, this is reality, where we have some disconnect there. The teams aren't talking. When you walk through the hallways, do you see actual teams communicating, going over to each other, asking questions and working together? Or are they isolated in their own little areas and they're just kind of hammering away? And depending on all kinds of status meetings to try and get everybody in sync on what's happening. Those are those sorts of things that you want to look for in your organization, that if you see that, like Rhonda talked about, that, well, we're only giving the good information, we're hiding the bad information, teams aren't communicating, they aren't collaborating as they execute and work, and especially maybe we don't even do things like, planning together in a joint PI planning where we're getting that alignment. Those are all areas that, red flags that we've got some problems here that are going to lead to a major disconnect and probably missing on our actual value delivery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something just to add there really quickly about the metrics and the psychological safety. Rhonda, I've been in exactly your position as well with many organizations, right? No one wants to hear that bad information. But it's also really important to understand that data is just data, right? So like you have to look at it with business context. You have to look at it from where you started from and understand like, hey, are we actually going in the right direction? A lot of times, like we're just looking to get baselines and try to get some understanding of where we are today so that we can improve. Don't let progress get in the way of perfection. Or sorry, perfection get in the way of progress. Gosh, I always mix that one up.
It's so relevant.
We all knew what you meant in our heads.
Yeah. That's super helpful. Anything else from the panel here? I know it sounds like there's a lot of potential to transform, and next we're going to see how successful transformation can play out. Any final thoughts before we move to that?
I would throw out one final thought there that both Danielle and Rhonda called out very well. Those metrics make a difference, and making sure that you are measuring what matters, and really understanding all of those flow metrics and how they apply to your organization. Because if we don't know what to measure, so we don't know how to look at the flow metrics, we don't know what value is for the organization, we need to be able to define that. If we don't know what to measure, we're going to measure what we can. And that's where you end up getting a lot of those metrics that, try to look good on a dashboard that just measure the efficiency of the teams and things like that, because it's easy to measure. We know that it's there and we can start with that. But asking that question, does it actually help us understand where we have the misalignment and how to deal with it and what we can do to move forward towards that value delivery? So really focusing on those value delivery metrics are highly important.
Completely agree, Jim. And, working at Atlassian, where we have an enterprise solution, you would be surprised. I'm surprised sometimes of some of the largest companies in the world are still doing this in Excel and other dispersed systems. And then instead of like a holistic platform like the Atlassian platform, to truly get those insights and have the right information in order to speed along and really correlate this type of insight. A lot of companies out there are struggling with it.
It's amazing to me that I've heard of Excel being used in agile management and tracking, gosh, for 15 years now. Yeah. And it's still on the forefront. Great points. So thank you all. So the good news is there is potential to transform with all that the collective learning and the knowledge share in the space. So let's talk about Agile at scale and the true transformation potential. I think we'll start with Danielle on exploring what portfolios might look like.
I think this was interesting. This was a talk that was given towards the end of the SAFE Summit. And I think it just truly goes back to that flexibility of the framework and the evolution of modern organizations. So we heard from some folks at SAFE Summit that, hey, portfolio might not be the top level for our organization. We might need something above that. We're a little bit more complex. We're a little bit larger. And so there was this concept thrown out there of portfolios that we may see. Maybe we'll find a better name for it, coming into SAFE 6.1 or 7.0 in the next iteration of this. But I think that's something to just keep in mind, is that this is an ever-evolving framework to work with those modern organizations. So I'd probably say keep a lookout for some information about that coming out.
Yeah, that's some really good points that Danielle makes there, and it is some areas to kind of pique your interest maybe a little bit. Keep an eye out for some upcoming new releases from the framework team on that concept of portfolios. And there were some really good talks at the summit on that as well, looking at just beyond an individual safe portfolio that we've talked about traditionally into those enterprises that have massive enterprise portfolios that then feed down into their individual business units and so forth. So lots of good content on there, and some good talks that we had at the summit. One of them that talked about the how strategy at the overall enterprise level and putting together a strategy framework that feeds into these various portfolios to help connect them into a common portfolio. That one was done by Marshall Guillory on his experience in working with NASA and how they actually went about that journey there, and a few other talks that we had at that level as well that are very interesting.
Yeah, so, and also, some of the talks there were represented, and we've all pointed this out, across the industry, right? Didn't matter. I actually used this the other day. I mean, Betty Crocker is a tech company. Every company is a tech company, and it's really surprising. Like, you mentioned Boeing. We've talked about them. FedEx. Believe it or not, I was on that FedEx journey. I was part of that, and I can actually speak to from top level down. It's probably been one of my best experiences in my career to work with FedEx and help them on that journey. CVS and gas station space. I mean, at Atlassian, we see it across the board, financial space, and just focusing on value delivery and outcomes, and then the tooling that puts all of this together is just magical, with the right culture and leadership to lead the company to success.
Yeah, and that's really great that we're seeing a large increase in understanding that Agile is not just for technologies, like you called out. We're seeing lots of industries that are really accelerating and being able to apply the principles of Agile. Looking at the oil and gas industry, we had a huge presence of the oil and gas industry. It was actually one of our most popular market focals of the summit. So during the summit, we had at lunchtime and stuff, we had tables with labels of the different industries that people could gather around to have conversations specific to that industry while they had lunch and everything, and be able to kind of focus their topics in those areas. And oil and gas was one of the largest ones, where they talked about things like how do you use SAFE for an oil platform out in the middle of the ocean drilling oil. How does SAFE apply there? And they're actually, using SAFE to help them be better on how they maintain safety and compliance and actually effectiveness of those oil platforms. How to find new drilling locations, for oil. Much of this has nothing to do with technology, but the principles of agility apply, because we're looking at business agility and how Agile really helps us think in a mindset of really, it's the scientific method, right? We develop a hypothesis of value, we put a test in place, we learn from that, and then we adjust, and that applies no matter what industry you're in. We've seen, Susan mentioned earlier that roughly 20% of the attendees at Summit were from the government space. We're getting much more interest from the government space. In fact, Congress is actually currently looking at, and we've had talks with Congress specifically on recognizing official safe roles within government and within Congress to be able to allow for the different agencies to actually hire people for safe specific roles. That's fantastic and is really going to open up the opportunities in that world. And so there's lots of expansion going on in adoption of safe in various different markets.
That's awesome. I'm looking at our time here. I wish we could keep talking about this, but we do need to finish on a couple things. But just hearing you all weigh in, it brings to mind how over the years I've heard organizations say, well, in our industry, it's different. This Agile stuff doesn't apply to us. And what I gleaned from listening to all of you talk is whether your industry is about baking cakes or building rockets, there's a relevancy here, and it's just really cool to see how it all can come together scientifically and very organically. Thank you. Any final thoughts from the group here? I think we're good on time here. Just a couple quick takeaways to make sure that we point these out to you guys, and then we're gonna move into, actually, I'm ahead of myself here. Let's move into our lightning round real quickly, and then we'll leave you with some takeaways. So we have just a couple minutes here to all weigh in super quickly. Let's kick things off with, just from my perspective, I mentioned this earlier, how I heard numerous times in all different conversational contexts at the summit about organizational change management. And my takeaway was how much OCM is a key part of any sustained, meaningful Agile transformation at scale, period. Hands down, it's relevant, it's needed. Danielle.
Yeah, so I think one of my favorite topics that came from Safe Summit was actually this talk that was called "In Times of Crisis, the Government Shifts Left." And they talked about watermelon Agile, where it's green on the outside and then you chop it open and it's red on the inside. And I think that goes back to some of what Jim was talking about with the leadership buy-in and, go make them Agile, right? Like, leadership doesn't need to buy in. And that's what they were talking about in that talk, specifically about getting that leadership buy-in. Jim, what do you have?
Yeah, my favorite number one takeaway was a talk by Dwayne Bushman on diet and exercise, how they're a lot like safe transformations. And going back to that change management, you need a plan, you need a goal, and you actually need to manage that and monitor that as you go through. And they're both very, very much alike. So fantastic talk. Recommend you go and watch that video on that.
Yeah, and mine was with Jeremy Schwartz. He was actually a keynote speaker. He'd been a former CEO for L'Oreal and Pandora, again, not tech companies. And he really hit home with focusing on customer feedback, value-driven change management, just like what we talked about. But also what was a little different is he focused on planet-friendly products, and they are actually very profitable. I very much enjoyed his keynote speaking.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So we're going to make sure we carve out just a couple minutes at least for questions. Quick note here, you'll have access to the links. We've got some very relevant resources here available for you to take a look at afterwards. So now we'll move over to questions. Let's give everyone a moment to find that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If there's anything we don't get to today, we will follow up with you and make sure we get an answer out to you, following the webinar. So we've got a question. Where should I begin in my Agile transformation? As we talked about, this is big stuff. Where to start?
Yeah,
what do you guys think?
I'll address this because I'm asked this, at least from a tooling standpoint, but asked this quite often, is keep it simple, right? Don't boil the ocean. Focus on the 80-20 rule, right? You don't have to transform the whole organization. I think that is so key to just success in general, no matter what you do. When you take on too much, you take on too much, right? And so I would say just focus on that, focus on the teams that are open and the leadership that is open to doing it. And then, just incrementally going from there.
Yeah.
It's a crawl, walk, run.
Mhm.
Yeah,
What do you
and I would add just one thing to that, which is start asking the question, why? Why do we want to do this? There's your beginning point. Identify the outcome that you're targeting to achieve before you do anything else.
Love that. Start with why. I think any more questions? I think we're close on time. Feel free to ask in the question answer. Again, if you're rushing to your next appointment, like many of us do and on busy work days, just feel free to chat those in, and then we'll make sure to follow up. Okay, we've got one more. How do I get help, outside of my organization related to starting my Agile transformation or continuing it? What about external help? Panel?
I think I would, so that one of the pieces of literature that we're sharing out within the webinar is about the roadmap to business agility. I think that's a really great resource. I would just recommend for you to start with. We also have a Isosceles agility triangle assessment that really focuses on the people side, the practices side, and then also on your tooling side to understand maybe like where the missing links are for you or where you could dig in a little bit deeper. And I think that would be a really great place for you to start. I think Jim would probably agree that the SAI website has a plethora of information, and so does the Atlassian Confluence space. There's tons of information out there that you can get from various resources as well.
Yeah, I would also say that, one of the keys to successful transformations that we've identified, at Scaled Agile is working with a partner. There's a reason that we have a partner network out there, and partners like Isos that have done this before and that know the pitfalls and know how to help you through that. So I would start by, reaching out to Isos and asking, hey, how can you help us? There's a reason, sports teams, bring in coaches and have, coaches to help them out with that. They need that expertise. They need somebody who's been there and done that and can really guide them through there. So I'd reach out to Isos and, ask for some help there.
Thank you so much, all. I think we are wrapping up here with our questions. We'll make sure to get connected with everyone who's chatted in a hello. Thank you so much for those. I'll wrap up with this. I'm so glad that you shared this time with us, and I hope that you did find it valuable. Thank you so much to the panel, and thank you all for joining us.